Hi, we're here with Ryan Finn at the Richmond Yacht Club. Just trying to get his thoughts on his journey from New York to San Francisco on his very famous Proa called Jzerro, built by Russell Brown. Tell us, Ryan, if there had to be some huge challenges, and we're just wondering, what some of those challenges were. I think our audience is kind of curious to that.
I think the hardest part of this voyage overall was not knowing what the challenges were going to be, just having an idea that they existed, but not how I was going to actually interact with them once I was underway. And I had a lot of surprises out there that I haven't really experienced any surprises on the sailboat for years, and this trip was full of them. And I'm not talking about equipment failures and my electrical issues and all those things, but as far as like psychological challenges, I think was the hardest part. Mostly being, depending on weather file downloads and having high expectations for their accuracy was a sort of stressful learning curve that you can't depend too much on those forecasts. You have to get an overall view of what's going on, but where the rubber hits the road, it's just you have to sail and do old school sail handling, negotiating seas, and that kind of a thing. And I've done a lot of weather routing prior to this, but I was sailing through a lot of regions that aren't very well forecast because there's not a lot of traffic down there, so there's not a lot of feedback. The weather models don't just happen on the internet. They're not just happening in the computer. There are actually people feeding data into the system from around the world, and there aren't a lot of people doing that for Argentina to Chile. And then in light air, forecasting light air is very difficult. So crossing the doldrums was extremely difficult, way harder than I imagined it would be. And by the end of it, I just realized that this is the biggest challenge, is just relieving myself of the crutch of technology and going back to sailing.
So it sounds like I'm hearing you were a little frustrated with the correlation or maybe lack of correlation even with the information that you could get regarding weather.
Yes.
In some of those places.
Yeah, and I would like to do this voyage again because I'd like to go into it with those expectations being cut in half and just having an idea of what to expect around Cape Horn, the coldness of Cape Horn, the frequent becalmed situations I found myself in around the Cape Horn. I mean, a lot of the times, the forecast would show 12 knots of wind, and I would be sitting there in 2 knots of wind with big swell coming from the Southern Ocean, waiting for a gale to come. So it's a lot of, I've done it now, so I know what to expect, and I know how to get myself through that emotionally. Towards the end of the trip, I was pretty accustomed to it. But at that point, I didn't know what to expect, and there was a lot of learning involved. And
yeah, I can imagine.
Hard.
Yeah, I can imagine. As we talked before, there's just so many variables, and getting a grasp on that. I can imagine it's hard to learn to prioritize what the information is and what you need to do with it,
right,
versus what the real world is doing and what you need to do to survive.
Yeah, it's hard to it's a hard note to know what to invest in and what to ignore. And yeah, and the other thing is, I would make sure I didn't set Jzerro up to be very easily handled in between sail changes. I expected there to be more stable conditions, but I found myself shifting gears it would be like in a gearbox shifting from first to fifth gear without very much in between.
Wow.
And I would be set up for that a lot better this time.
Wow.
And I'd like to do it on a larger boat so that I'm more comfortable and it's faster. But I definitely wouldn't want to go on a boat that's any slower, for sure. I think as the slowest I would go is what I did with Jzerro. I think anything slower than that would be dangerous coming up the Chilean coast because you'd get smacked pretty hard by something.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's something that multi-hullers have said forever is their safety and speed in getting you out of, or away from situations
Yeah, there's no
quicker.
question.
And you, that was definitely your experience. It sounds like.
That's my one main thing I took from this, is that
Wow.
speed is safe. If you have a reliable boat and working systems, and you can get out, if you can do 300 miles a day, you can escape a lot of stuff. And I managed to do that. And if I was on a very seaworthy 36-foot full keel boat, I would have seen 30-foot waves at some point. I managed to escape that. So.
Wow. Well, that's impressive. I think that's some really good information to ponder. And what I'd like to say is, as one of your sponsors at Colligo, we're really, really glad you made it home safe. And because we watched the tracker in Windy as close as anybody, and from our couch we could see how bad it was. We weren't with you,
Yeah.
but it certainly looked bad from our perspective.
Yeah.
And you made it through safely, and you're here.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
No, and I want to thank you guys. I mean, I don't think it would have been possible to do it without your rigging. And I was so happy when I sailed underneath the Golden Gate Bridge with an aluminum mast from '94. You can't squeeze that much blood from a stone for too long, and I just feel like Colligo Marine and your rigging solutions were part of the reason I was able to do it at all. So thank you.
Well, very cool. Thanks for the kind words, and appreciate your testimonial.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Yep.